This is Jordan Bradford here with Jeff Beck, and you're listening to Just Ballin with JB. Join us each week now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We're going to have some more stuff for you here soon, but we're kind of rolling it out one platform at a time. So if you're on any of those, you can find us by just searching Just Ballin with JB. But with that, let's get right into it, Jeff. We got some one-biters today.
Yeah, let's jump in right into the one-biters here. Red Rocket comes in. I think that nickname's catching on, but he comes in. Panthers get the win over the Raiders. What's next for Bryce Young? You know, some questions there, and it doesn't look great that Andy Dalton comes in and gets a win, but who knows? Maybe he'll get another shot somewhere else, and maybe he should.
Yeah, maybe. We also had Jim Harbaugh's 17-game winning streak finally comes to an end. So the question I have, I guess, is how long will he go before another loss? We got another 17 games in us, Jim? I don't think so, but impressive nonetheless.
Definitely impressive. We knew the Steelers were getting that dub. I called that one early. On to the next. Tennessee welcomes OU to the SEC with the 10-point win. What's next for OU in the SEC? Kept it reasonably close, I think closer than we thought, but they got Auburn next and then got to jump into Texas. So not going to be an easy road in the SEC as we obviously knew. So we'll see how OU fares in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've got one of the toughest schedules, especially for a newcomer. So if they think it's going to get any easier, I don't think that's what's in store for them. But speaking of teams that don't have it any easier this week, Illinois shocks Nebraska on Saturday in their 400th consecutive sellout. They go into Nebraska, they win. It's a tough place to play. Impressive performance. Are we thinking college football playoffs now for the Fighting Illini? I don't know.
If you take out Pat Mahomes, anything is possible. Next one, little controversy that ended up on my plate here, but Brett Favre announces he has Parkinson's disease. I should not be laughing during that. That was from something else. But during hearing over his involvement in the $77 million Mississippi State welfare scam. I assume, obviously, he's telling the truth with that, which is, very sad to hear. But obviously pretty convenient timing to share that news when you're going through something like that. Sad to hear, and best of luck to him. But yeah, it is not looking good so far over the allegations right now.
Yeah. I would guess it was maybe those 1,000 concussions he said he had when he was asked about it. So, maybe Tua should think on this and consider his next steps as he rehabs from his most recent concussion. But
yeah.
Finally, a last one-biter here. Tennessee and Penn State paid Kent State a combined $2.95 million to play them in back-to-back weeks, and the combined score was 127-0. You can guess who scored 0 in those two games. That was Kent State. I'm thinking maybe Notre Dame should put them on the schedule next year. After all, Kent State knows how to show up and play their part, collect their paycheck, and basically act as if you were never there.
Yeah, you could pay me $3 million for a spanking like that. I'd be happy to partake in that.
Yeah, interesting setup that Kent State's got going on there. But hey, it's nice to cash those checks. So,
no question.
Let's go ahead and jump into the meat of our first part of our podcast here today. And we've got our first story we want to talk about is, we're jumping into the Bears. So, Jeff, they fell short again. Do you think Bears fans should be regretting the decision that Poles in the front office made this offseason by moving on from Justin Fields and taking a chance on Caleb Williams?
I don't think they should regret it. Short answer, I don't think they should regret it. We'll obviously get into the Steelers a little bit later in some ways, and obviously I've been feeling pretty good about where the Steelers are at and Justin Fields in general. But I don't think they should regret it. I think Fields' success is going to be very much linked to the coaching staff over there. We've talked about Tomlin quite a bit, and I think a lot of that success is going to happen because of what's there. I don't know if he ever would have been successful with the Bears. So I think it was the right move to do what they did. Now, that being said, is Caleb going to be able to excel in this system and setup? I think as much as we can put a lot of emphasis on the shortcomings of Caleb Williams so far, right, which I think were almost inevitable based on the hype around him. I also think a lot of it, offensive line, we're going to touch on that, is a huge part of some of the problems. I think coaching is a big part of that. So I think with the current setup that they have, Caleb is going to have a better chance to succeed in this current setup than Justin Fields did. We'll see if this current setup is going to change at any point in the future, right? If we see any changes, whether it's mid-year or at the end of the year, we'll see. But I think as far as regretting it, you can't necessarily regret that decision just based on, again, the current setup that you have. I think Caleb's going to have a better chance to succeed than Fields would have, given what we've seen thus far.
Yeah, well said. I think at the end of the day, if you look at the comparison of the two, right, you could make a strong argument that Caleb Williams has shown more progression in 3 games with the Chicago Bears than Justin Fields did in the 40 games that he played for them. And it's not a knock on Justin Fields. He's having a really good start to the season for the Steelers. I'm actually super happy for him when you think about like everything that he went through with the Bears, and they didn't really set him up for success, especially early on. And then there at the tail end, I think that they were trying to do their best to kind of put him in a position to succeed. But it's really tough when you've got coordinators changing all the time, head coaches changing. You don't really have an offensive line. Up until last year, they had hardly any weapons at all to speak of. And so you can see the front office, I think, making some good moves to help Caleb get into a better spot so that he doesn't have the same type of failures. But I like what I see out of Caleb Williams. I think the problem that the Bears have right now that, they really do need to get figured out quickly is play calling. The one thing that was pretty alarming in that game against the Colts was that the Colts defense, especially their run defense, worst in the league right now. Yeah. And the Bears still could not establish any even, semblance of a running game. They ran for 63 yards.
They were outrushed 150 yards to 63 yards against what was the worst defense against the rush all season. I mean, it's short season, but still, what we've seen so far, terrible. And to get outrushed by more than 2.5 times.
Well, and I don't understand it. The offensive line is mostly the same from last year. They upgraded from Khalil Herbert to Swift. And even if you don't think that's an upgrade, you still have Khalil Herbert on the roster.
Correct.
And he ran the ball much better than they are as a team last year. So, you look at the evidence, and I think that the blame has to go on the offensive coordinator right now, and that's Shane Waldron. And, I get it. He's on a new team. He's got new players he's working with, but he's got to get things back to basics a little bit. You can't have Caleb Williams dropping back 52 times. No. That is just too much in his 3rd career game with the offensive line that the Bears have.
No, it's clearly, I think we both have agreed on that the play calling, just from the eye test, watching it does not feel like they are putting themselves in good positions. A lot of the numbers go to back that up, right? Having him drop back 50 times, it's just not going to work. But I'm curious, I was looking at some of the numbers, and then these are those interesting stats that I look at where it's like, depending on which way you want to take them, you can kind of make your argument one way or the other. When we look at their offense from this game, they had the ball for 35 minutes compared to the Colts for 25 minutes. So had 10 minutes more possession. They had 26 first downs to the Colts 15 first downs. They were 13 of 26 on 3rd and 4th down conversions. So combined those, they went 4 on 4th way more than the Colts did, but combined 13 of 26, 50%. Colts were 3 of 13. So when you look at that, you're saying a lot of those numbers look pretty good, right? Again, we know that Caleb passed a lot more and they got outrushed. So those numbers are very negative to what we would think we'd want to see in that situation. But those numbers, you're sitting there saying, okay, so if they did all of that and yet they still only put up, 16 points and they still lost that game, that's where I'm kind of trying to figure out which way am I taking those numbers. Like those numbers would all suggest, even if we got outrushed a little bit, that we still would have been able to pull out a win over a team that we don't think is great, at least probably bottom half minimum.
Right.
You know, I'm looking at those and I'm just like, that's a little shocking that we still didn't win that game somehow, right? Again, I don't think the play calling was great, but I'm trying to figure out how did all those numbers happen and we still lose that game. That's a little concerning to me.
Yeah, I think some of the numbers, especially those like the more first downs and the time of possession numbers, I think maybe a little skewed towards the end of the game there, where the Bears needed to get 2 scores. They were clearly like pressing. And so I think the Colts defense was naturally playing a little bit more of like a softer zone, kind of to allow the stuff underneath there at the very end, but try not to give up massive plays. But I will say there were good things from the offense and from Caleb Williams specifically. I would say one, his connection with Rome Odunze seems to have finally clicked. And him and Rome look fantastic when there's some time for him to throw in the pocket. And, I think that's something for all Bears fans to be excited about, because regardless of the rest of the weapons, those two are going to basically be here for as long as either of them are here for.
I think I'd mentioned that to you early about him. I mean, obviously I like DJ Moore as much as, any fan, and I didn't expect Keenan to be hurt immediately, but he has had a history of doing that. He's obviously getting a little bit older. I thought he could easily finish this year as definitely the number 2, if not even kind of becoming his primary target. Now, season's young. They have a lot of room to grow, so we'll see. But to your point, I mean, I think, we saw some really good stuff from just those two, kind of connection, timing-wise. A lot of good stuff there to be excited about. Yes, plenty of, again, errors that we see that we need to see cleaned up and get fixed. But that's definitely, I think, a high point for all Bears fans, not even just for this year. Whether they underperform this year, which at this point is looking a little more likely than not, for the future, right? I mean, like you said, that they should be together for a while. So that's definitely encouraging and pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I think I would just encourage all Bears fans to remember that this is not a one season plan that the Bears have here. And hopefully all things go well, Caleb Williams is the quarterback for the next dozen years, at least. And we have a lot of success, and hopefully that brings about, at least one Super Bowl. Would love to see multiple, but, at least one. You have to see that as the outcome here if things continue to progress. So, I would say that especially if this was Caleb Williams' first game on Sunday, I think fans would be very, very impressed.
Absolutely.
If that was the first game he had played. And it's only his third. So I'm hoping some of the Bears fans that are a little maybe uneasy about Caleb, or maybe didn't even trust Caleb to begin with, would just kind of take a step back and realize he's a pretty good quarterback. And he's going to be a good quarterback. He's going to have to figure out the offense with a coordinator, that's struggling with some play calling too. And he's a, first-time play caller here in Chicago. So I think a lot to be excited about for the Bears, but it's going to be, another test this week. So they better be prepared.
Yeah, speaking of play calling and coaches, what do you think about what we've seen so far from some of the underwhelming teams? Any coaches that you're looking at saying, I don't know if they're going to be head coach much longer?
Well, I think the obvious one is Doug Peterson. And honestly, I'm a little surprised that as of the recording of this video that he hasn't lost his job. And I don't wish anyone to lose their job. I want to preface that, but he's done a very, very poor job there. And whether it's all on him, which it certainly isn't, a lot of it's on the GM. I don't really understand what they're doing with their roster. They brought in Calvin Ridley last year, and then they basically let him go for nothing after one season when he was their top receiver last year. And while I don't necessarily think Calvin Ridley is a true number one, I don't really understand the process there. I'm really not sure what's going on with Trevor Lawrence. Guy's lost 9 straight games as a starting quarterback, and he's got all the physical tools. There's times where he looks like he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL for sure. And then, he has games like Monday night where he throws a unbelievably bad pick to DeMar Hamlin, who, shout out to that guy, pretty big time recovery. goes from being dead on the field to first career pick on a Monday
I
night.
was gonna say not again something to joke about often, but someone was like, I think Trevor Lawrence is the first guy to throw an interception to a dead guy. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah, for
because
real.
he's healthy now, it's fine, I think, to joke about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think Doug Peterson is not only on the hot seat, at this point, I would be shocked if he is the coach by the end of the season. The only way that he retains this job is if the Jags turn this season around basically before Sunday and figure out how to win some football games fast. And they're going to have to make the playoffs because the Jags made the playoffs 2 years ago, and everyone thought they'd arrived maybe a little early. Trevor Lawrence has that big comeback game after throwing all those picks in the first half against the Chargers. They play Kansas City pretty tough. And last year, I think everybody had the Jags penciled in as, okay, top 4 in the AFC. Trevor Lawrence gets an injury, plays poorly, team misses the playoffs, and then you start this season 0-3. The vibes are really bad in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think of it, but I'm starting to get a little nervous that Trevor Lawrence might not be the guy either. So
I was gonna say that's I think the saving grace for Doug Peterson right now. And I'm, no fan of Doug Peterson one way or the other. Could care less one way or the other. But I know you kind of thought could be gone right now. And we talked like last week on the pod quite a bit just about the coaching carousel that's going on, right? People have a very short leash if they're not excelling, very quick to get rid of them. I think what is probably keeping him his job is he has some pedigree, right? You can be a full supporter in how he got to where he got, or you could think it was luck or, just situational. But he has some stuff to lean on, which I think is going to help him quite a bit keep that job. Whereas Trevor Lawrence, I don't think has really done anything in the NFL that is kind of a backbone to it. Now, he obviously got paid. He got the contract. We understand what he did in college and even in high school. Incredible player coming out, but I think that's almost hurting him now, right? Similar to Caleb, when you have that kind of heightened expectation, which he was close, right? A little different style player maybe from Caleb or Mahomes, but still was a very highly sought after prospect. I was just looking through his numbers, and I think every single number, and obviously that's an exaggeration, but everyone I at least clicked on, he was ranked like 25th or 26th in the league for like every quarterback statistic, passer rating, completion percentage, you name it. The only people behind him were either rookies, which we know a lot of them have struggled, Caleb Williams, some of the other guys that have struggled early, second-year guys, Bryce Young, who obviously has already gotten benched, your Will Levis's, or Deshaun Watson, which is the only outlier is Deshaun Watson back there. So it's either first, second-year players or Deshaun Watson that were bad. And again, that was not every single statistic, but a majority of them that I looked up. So to me, again, similar, we've talked a lot of Caleb on here. We've talked about offensive line and play calling. A lot of stuff goes into that. So I'm not putting it all on Trevor, but I will say I think he's admitted he's not playing as well as he needs to. I think the numbers are backing that up. The team is, again, I don't know exactly where the line ranks, offensive line ranks. I mean, ETN is a solid running back. We've seen his capability. I'm not saying he's, the best in the league, but I definitely don't think he's the worst. Solid running back. They do have some decent weapons. I mean, Evan Ingram is a solid player. I know he's been kind of in and out of injury, but he looks to be a solid tight end. Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, and Brian Thomas coming out, like, that's a decent set of weapons. Again, I'm not saying it's the best in the league by any means, but, they have some weapons. It's definitely one of those things where I think that's what might save Doug Peterson and keep his job for a little bit longer than maybe you're even thinking, is just some of those numbers. And again, I'm not really, the Jags just aren't a team to me that I have that much passion one way or the other. Hate the coach, love the coach. I just don't fully have that in me. But I think kind of looking at those numbers, I think Trevor's going to catch a lot of this heat as much as Doug. So if we're keeping Trevor, we got him paid, unless Trevor, this is again one of those situations where I think it might not necessarily be the wins and losses, but internally the conversations. If Trevor is going back and saying, hey, Doug's not what we need, he's not calling the right plays, and there's bad vibes, he might get canned sooner rather than later. But if that's not happening, if Trevor is okay with him and for whatever reason they're struggling, he might be able to hang on for a while. But either way, to see where they kind of were ascending to middle of last year to the drop-off they've had, whatever it is, 8 straight losses now, I mean, Yeah, it is not looking good there, and I think yesterday was kind of the dart right there. Is I don't think they have a chance, so you're kind of just tossing the season up. It's like, are we just going to work on things to get better for next year? Feels a little late, in Trevor's career just to be like, having a whole season go to that, but I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, one
I'm
one thing
excited.
that I think is also maybe helpful for Trevor is that he is only 24 years old. So that's actually pretty young. Jaden Daniels, who had a great game last night against
Yeah,
Bengals, I mean, he looks
Washington in general.
fantastic.
Yeah,
He is going to be turning 24 in a few weeks. So, you know, it's something to keep in mind. Lawrence came into the,
sure.
NFL pretty young. Sam Darnold, kind of similar mold. You're seeing him kind of maybe show a little bit more, maybe with the right coach. So, yeah, I just wonder if Doug Peterson's the right coach. And I I also wonder, is Doug Peterson the Nick Foles of coaches? He won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles, but Nick Foles really, we all knew, wasn't the guy. And
Yeah,
Doug Peterson wasn't in Philly for very long, so clearly something didn't, gel well there. I just
I
wonder,
think
like,
that's
is Doug
fair. I
Peterson
think that
actually a really good coach, or did he just get hot?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very fair. I think that's the only thing that he can at least hang his hat on, right? Like, he
Yeah.
has something to
Yeah,
say, well,
can't
I
take it away
did
from him.
accomplish this. But I
Yeah.
agree. It could have been a total fluke. Obviously, I think most of us thought Nick Foles was a fluke. That was not something that was going to last. So, yeah, maybe he's in the same boat, and that's who he is. He's cosplaying as Chuck Peterson, even though
Uh,
he's Nick Foles. I don't know. That's gonna be not a fun one to watch, no matter what. The games are not gonna be fun. Not gonna be fun to see how that plays out. I mean, again, a lot of money just put into Trevor Lawrence. If all of a sudden you think that it is him and not, I mean, there's not really a good way for this to end unless they get rid of Doug sooner rather than later and they somehow find a coach that fits really quickly. And I think that's really their only answer. Otherwise, I don't know what the outlook is the next couple of years.
yeah, I mean, I think this season just looks like it's, almost done. I know it's only week 3 or we're going into week 4, but bad vibes in Jacksonville. So
Another
let's talk.
team,
Yeah.
yeah, another
What do
team
you?
that was kind of pretty high expectations, I would say. Pretty high expectation for the quarterback, for the team, and not off to a good start. Cincinnati. That was not a good game last night. End result. I mean, offense played well, but end result is obviously not good. 0-3. Steelers pick looking even better. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about Zach Taylor there?
Yeah, I think, if you going into Monday night, I kind of had written down, if the Jags and the Bengals manage to, lose these games, are both coaches on the hot seat? And I think about halfway through that Cincinnati game, I was thinking, okay, he could be on the hot seat here if the Bengals can't keep up. But, you know, their offense looks good. And I will say, Joe Burrow said in the offseason, that their Super Bowl window is as long as he's the quarterback. And I kind of agree with it a little bit. But what I will say is their defense is horrible.
Yeah.
That is not a Super Bowl caliber defense. It doesn't have to be a great defense. You don't have to have an 85 Bears level of defense, but it's got to be better than what it was last night. And I'm not 100% sure they can fix it. They've let a lot of guys go over cap concerns. I just don't know where Cincinnati's going to go from here. And I'm wondering if, it's going to be Joe Burrow and his big bag of money that they paid him and nobody else here very quickly. I think Zach Taylor's a decent coach, but I don't know if it's going to ever work there given the current owner structure where they just don't seem to want to pay anybody. I mean, you cannot have your two primary weapons not getting paid. Both of them are disgruntled. I mean, I think Jamar Chase or T. Higgins could sit out any given week, basically, because they might just say, screw this. I'm not going to go out here and, blow out my ACL or, rupture an Achilles so that I can, play one more game here. I need to get paid. So I know Jamar Chase got that insurance policy. Wouldn't shock me if T. Higgins has something similar, but at the end of the day, I mean, these guys want to play long term. They want to get paid. And I don't know if Cincinnati's going to do that. And so I think Zach Taylor, at the end of the day, he's got to be the guy to figure out how to get these dudes to be able to play well.
Yeah.
I don't know if he can do it. I don't know if anyone can do it, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have many negative thoughts on it. Like you said, I mean, the offense was clicking every metric again last night since he had over Washington. I mean, other than completion percentage, I think for Jaden Daniels, which, 97 or whatever he threw. I mean, that's
Yeah,
awesome. So good
crazy.
for him. But other than that, I mean, yards, rushing, you name it, the offense was clicking. I mean, it was a back and forth game. I mean, I think we talked about briefly, but that was the first game since, what they say, like 1950 with no turnovers
I think
and no punts.
1940.
Or 1940, was it? Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
1940.
that's so it's hard to obviously critique them from that standpoint of it. But the defense, I mean, yeah, just to be getting run over, and we'll see what Jaden Daniels becomes. Obviously, I think it's a great start to a career. Obviously, probably the best start of any of the rookies this year. Looking good with no turnovers, and he's rushing well, and standing upright, which is great. But I think if we're looking across the league, that's not like your offensive juggernaut. So for that defense not to be able to put together, and again, they did go for it on quite a few fourth downs, even some risky ones. That's tough for a defense to handle all night long. I get that. But you got to be able to put some stops together. And, we've talked about that division multiple times. That's supposed to be kind of the rough and tough division that plays some defense, gets down and dirty. And clearly they don't have that in them. I think they can let it fly with the best of them out there, especially when everybody's healthy and engaged. And again, depending on people getting paid, we'll see how engaged they are. But yeah, I mean, 0-3, we've talked about that. I mean, slim chances of getting to the playoffs when you start 0-3, and they haven't even played a single division game. I mean, you still got Ravens, Pittsburgh. I mean, Cleveland, obviously, you'd be down on, but
They struggle against Cleveland historically.
exactly. That's what I was going to say. They struggle against them, even
And
though
that's the worst team in that division.
Yeah.
Well,
So
now maybe it's Cincinnati. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird, I think, too. When I look at like NBA, it definitely feels like you have a fall guy. When a season doesn't go as planned, there's like always has to be a fall guy. Like a guy gets traded, a pretty significant name gets traded, a coach gets fired. Like that seems to happen a little bit more often. NFL, I don't feel like you see that as much. You start to see these rumblings, right? Like, let's just say in Philly, Sirianni gets fired. That wouldn't be like shocking. That's something that's kind of been brewing. People have been talking about it. You're kind of getting these feelings, whether they, had a bad ending to the season or not. It's something that's kind of taking its time, and you're saying things aren't working. I don't feel like you're hearing much about Zach Taylor. So, I mean, it's another one, like, he's on the hot seat. We know coaches are, have shorter leashes. But I definitely would say I don't feel like it's him. I'd put it more on ownership for not paying people, letting people go, letting people walk. I mean, that's a huge problem I think they're dealing with. And then, I mean, the defense, and part of that obviously is keeping that personnel and paying the personnel. But that defense, I mean, just if you can't stop anybody, you're not going to be able to win a lot of those games. And so I don't know. I think they both are on the hot seat. Obviously, I'm not one necessarily to think, deservedly so for both of them. I think they both have their justifications to stay because of some of the other issues that are going on. But yeah, it's I think those are probably the two guys that, we definitely got to keep an eye on, especially with the losses, kind of stacking up where they're at. Yeah, one or two more of those, and who knows if we'll be seeing them again.
Yeah, I think Doug Peterson's seat is officially very hot, and I think Zach Taylor's seat is getting warm. A couple more, you had two more losses before they get a win, and I think it's going to start getting pretty toasty for him. But I think as of right now, I don't think he's, worried about losing his job. I think he's worried about how do I get my team to, pull out one win, and then we'll probably roll, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row, maybe. So
yeah,
they've got the offense for it. I just don't know if the defense is there. It's going to be a tough division. Steelers got to be feeling fantastic right now, sitting 3-0, top of the division. Cincinnati 0-3, and Baltimore 1-2, which brings us to our next topic. Derrick Henry, man, huge night for Baltimore. They roll the Cowboys. What do you think is the bigger deal? Is it the Ravens winning with their backs against the wall and maybe saving their season a little bit, or Cowboys just posting another dud against the playoff team?
Yeah, I think to me the bigger deal is definitely the Ravens. I think being 0-2, it probably, I mean, we had said it before. I would have had my money on the Ravens. Probably should have taken that as the lock of the week, which we'll talk about as well. But yeah, similar to the Bengals last night. I mean, those are kind of those ones that are really make or break for those types of teams. So I mean, Bengals lose that. I personally feel like they're done for the season. Like, I don't think they're going to be able to rebound from that and get to the playoffs. I think Ravens probably would have been I probably would have felt the exact same way about them. Maybe a little better, just simply because I think they have a better defense and a better overall team than the Bengals. But 0-3, is pretty close to a death sentence. So, yes, they kind of had to win where Dallas already had a win that first week against the Browns. So it wasn't nearly that same do or die as the Ravens. But the reason I still think that's a bigger deal is one, Derrick Henry really showing what he's still capable of doing. Clearly, the Dallas run defense is as bad as it gets. Worst in the league, giving up 185 yards a game, which is just insane in today's game.
Maybe the Bears could run against that defense.
They probably won't, though. They could, but they won't. So yes, knowing that's the case, it doesn't. Derrick Henry's isn't as exciting knowing that that's the case, but still, he almost did that 185 on his own. He was 151 yards, 25 attempts, 2 touchdowns. So I think bigger story for me because there was a lot of talk of him kind of being washed up and being old, right? Not that he was going to be terrible, but just when you get that old, you just can't be that same workhorse. You can't do the same stuff. And the other reason I think so is I do think the Ravens are a better team. We've talked about Lamar's shortcomings, and in the biggest moments in the playoffs, am I going to put my money on him? I don't think so, but I still think that they can get back to that spot, whether it's the conference championship, whatever it might be. I still think even with an 0-2 start, they'll be able to get back to that. I think they showed some good signs. I think they're figuring out how to incorporate Derrick Henry. I think that's a different style from what Lamar is used to. But the way they were running it, and again, Dallas is kind of the perfect test because you can kind of run anything you want running the ball and you're going to be solid. But I thought the way they were giving it to Derrick, the way that Lamar was pulling it back and running on his own, there was starting to be a really good balance of that. So I think that's the bigger deal to me because it proves Derrick Henry can be that guy. Maybe not every single game, but he can still be that when you need it. Shows me that Ravens are starting to build some chemistry with that. It's a huge piece they had to incorporate and kind of figure out. And to me, I already kind of thought Dallas is this up and down, bit of a fluky team. And I think most of us did, right? We've seen some great regular seasons, but we don't expect these great postseason runs. So to me, it didn't tell me a whole lot about Dallas. I already kind of knew their run defense sucked. Already kind of knew they're a little bit fluky. But this was, I think, encouragement to me that the Ravens can get back to where they need to be. The Bengals losing helps that. Browns not being great helps that. So I think the Ravens prove something. I think they'll be able to overcome an 0-2 start and still make some serious noise. So that was definitely, the biggest deal to me.
Yeah, I definitely see the point there. I think that the Ravens clearly needed a win. They've got the Bills coming up this coming week, and that's going to be a very difficult matchup for them. So,
yeah,
they really couldn't afford to go 0-3. Staring 0-4 in the face is, then you're talking like what your season's lost. Where are you going to go from here? What's the coaching going to look like? So I think it was a huge win for them. I think this told me a lot about the Cowboys, though. I felt like the Cowboys were maybe going to take a little step forward. I mean, they had a great season last year, culminating in a horrible loss in the playoffs that just was embarrassing for, the Cowboys, really. I mean, I just couldn't imagine them having a worse performance in the playoffs. And I was hoping that maybe after, the tumultuous offseason that they had, that maybe they would start to kick things into gear. Week 1 against the Browns defense, I thought they performed really well. And the Browns, while I don't think is a very good team, I think they've got a really solid defense. Now, maybe their defense isn't as good as it was last year. That's quite
Still
possible. But I think it's a really disappointing start for the Cowboys. I really don't know what they're going to do here. They decided to pay CeeDee Lamb. They've decided to pay Dak. Micah Parsons is going to want a big contract too, and I don't know that it makes sense to pay three guys when those 3 guys can't deliver anything all by themselves. There's 22 men on the field, offense and defense. You can't just pay 3 guys. So if I were a Dallas Cowboys fan, I would be very depressed about what this season is starting to look like, because in their next 8 weeks, they're going to be favored in probably 2 games at the moment. And both of those games are against the Giants, and they're already 1-2.
Everybody's favored against.
Yeah, everyone's going to be favored against the Giants. Even the Panthers now with the Red Rockets resurgence.
Red Rocket, yeah.
So I don't know what the Cowboys are going to do. Mike McCarthy's on, basically a lame duck coach. If he struggles this year, he does not have a contract for next year. So, I wouldn't say he's on the hot seat because Jerry Jones probably isn't going to fire him mid-season unless things really got horrible. But at this point, I'm not even sure that they're the second best team in their own division. The way the Commanders
Commanders are coming up,
they've gone 2 games without punting. 2 games in a row without punting, and they have a rookie quarterback. So
they can run on them similar to the Ravens. I mean, not exactly the same. I mean, Jaden Daniels isn't Lamar, and Robinson isn't Henry, but like they could still do some damage in that front. I agree with everything you're saying. To me, that wasn't such a big deal because, one, I kind of already thought it, and two, it's been a lot of noise around that. I mean, you listen to Jerry, and it's like the more he talks, the dumber just everything sounds. I was like, we can afford Derek. It's like, well, you could have. You just didn't do the things that you were supposed to do in order. You have all these things. And for me, I mean, exactly what you touched on with the money stuff. It's always a touchy subject because it's like people like us, how do you speak on $50 million, $45 million? Like, it's hard to speak on that because we aren't in that world. I mean, to have $3 million a year, I'd be like, that's sweet, let alone going from 50 to 47. Maybe that is a big deal to people. And I get that. I just find it incredible when you look at some of these teams that have had so much success, even when they've been in the opportunity to get paid. You're watching the Chiefs do it now, whether it's restructuring. Like Mahomes is getting paid, but like they figure out ways to restructure and do all these things. They let some of these guys go. Like their defense, was it McDuffie that left last year, or he stayed?
Snead left.
Mm-hmm. So they're like, we can't pay everybody, right? We can only pay some guys. We have to figure out which ones we can pay, and we have to figure out where to bring in new talent because of who we're paying, right? Like a Mahomes, we can pay him knowing he's going to make all these other receivers better. But if you're paying your receiver and your quarterback, you're not leaving a whole lot of funds for a lot of these other positions. And so it's just one of those things I find so interesting. And again, I'm not, saying anything bad about people who are willing to take their money. I get it. But it's just when you look at paying Dak that much money, like nobody thinks Dak is the best quarterback in the league. Nobody. I mean, not even Dak thinks he's the best quarterback in the league. I get how it works. I get how the market is. I get when you get paid, you become I get how that happens. But at the end of the day, you're making a lot of money and you're not going to perform even close to that. CeeDee Lamb, I do think is up there in one of those top receivers, but to receive that much money, I mean, Mike Park, again, is a top guy in that realm, but I don't know. I mean, he's so diverse in what he can do on defense, but would you be better off like a Myles Garrett, who's just really good at the one thing he does, and you're willing to pay for that because you're almost too diverse, doing too much different stuff that you're not making a big enough impact in one spot? I don't know. I look at that team and where that money's going now. And I mean, to everything you just said, I agree. Again, I just didn't think that was shocking. I kind of saw a little bit of that coming. I mean, not saying I thought they'd be, missing the playoffs for sure or anything, but I definitely figured they'd run into some issues. So yeah, I'm not sure where they're going to go, what things are going to look like, but yeah, if they don't get to it, maybe they're trying to flip flop. Maybe this year they're going to go kind of a weak regular season, then they're going to pick it up,
Well, if that's their strategy,
it's a bold strategy, but
they better hope that the Commanders either aren't as good as they looked last night or that the Eagles somehow fall apart like they did at the end of last year.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, I think the Cowboys are going to struggle in their own division, which is looking a little tougher than it did at the start of the season.
I agree. Agreed.
Well, let's do a quick segment here before we jump to our break, and then we'll jump into part 2 here. But before we do that, let's talk about the 3-0 teams. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs, Seattle Seahawks, Minnesota Vikings, Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Buffalo Bills. We have 5 teams at 3-0. So the question is, who stays undefeated the longest?
Yeah, this a little tough. Just kind of looking. I mean, really, it's kind of just looking at the schedule coming up and seeing who can continue to streak the longest, really. Obviously, I think all of us got the Chiefs as, the best and biggest contender, of course, doing that. But Chargers typically play them tough. That's their next game. I expect a nice bounce back after the loss this past week. Harbaugh wants to get that winning streak going again. I mean, you can't go 17 straight if you don't win the next ones. That could be a little upset alert, possibly. Seahawks got the Lions. That's just a tough one straight up. I think I like the Lions in that one, so that's gonna be tough right away. Vikings Packers. That could be a good game. I do think the Vikings are playing a bit better, especially if Love's not back, but kind of division rival, if you will. I think that's going to be a tight game. That could be a possible upset. And then Bills-Ravens. Like I said, I think the Ravens are going to take that step forward, and they're going to continue what they just did on that one. That's my purse. Like, Bills will take a quick step back. Ravens are going to start pushing forward. So that leaves me with, my obvious choice, the Steelers. They got the Colts, and yeah, I like that one a lot. Even if all these teams get through those next games, or some of them get through, the Steelers got the Colts. The Cowboys, who we just talked about, can run through them consistently with their two backs and Fields. Raiders after that, Jets. So I kind of like the out. I've been obviously high on the Steelers since day one this season, and it's not just because of that I'm going with them, but truly looking at kind of some of the tough matchups historically, where teams are at right now. I think the Steelers got a good chance to keep their streak going for a couple weeks minimum. Cowboys will be that tough challenge if the Cowboys somehow bounce back in week 2. But I think Colts should be able to lock that up, keep things rolling.
Yeah, I thought about the Steelers as well, and I agreed with you on all of the other teams except for the Minnesota Vikings.
That's funny.
I think that normally I'm not a big believer in the Vikings, and I don't know if it's because they have a history of coming up short in a lot of areas, specifically in the playoffs, a lot of missed field goals, some really unfortunate moments in the playoffs for them over the years. But there's something about this team that just feels a little different. Darnold, I've never been super high on him. Colin Cowherd this week has been kind of going on his little victory tour of sorts because he's been such a big Darnold guy back to when he was at USC. And I do think Darnold has always been better than what he's shown in the NFL, but he did go to the Jets and the Panthers first, and those are the two of the worst organizations in the league as it relates to quarterback play historically. So, I think there's maybe something to that. And I just like the Vikings schedule. Yes, they've got Green Bay coming up next, but I don't think Jordan Love is going to be playing. I think that's going to be Malik Willis again. Shout out to Matt LaFleur. Got 2 wins for Malik Willis, which seems really difficult to do, but he's done it. And I think that that's going to be tough to continue against a really well-coached Kevin O'Connell Minnesota Vikings team. And then, I think after that, the Vikings schedule, looks relatively easy. They got home games against the Jets and the Lions, then, a road game against the Rams, home against the Colts. I think the Vikings could potentially be, like a 7-0, 8-0 team that doesn't really end up being a, Super Bowl contender necessarily.
Yeah.
But is like one of those teams you're like, yeah, they're probably going to make the playoffs, and, they're going to be a tough team all year long. But I just don't see them as like a high end, win the Super Bowl, go to a Super Bowl type of team, like I do the Chiefs and the Bills of the last 5. I think Chiefs and the Bills have kind of clearly elevated themselves above everybody else. Chiefs, mainly with their pedigree and the fact that they started 3-0. The Bills, I think, just have impressed everybody. I think a lot of people were overly down on them after they kind of gutted some of the roster last offseason. But they just look fantastic. But their problem is, they got a big matchup against the Ravens. Bills are 3-0. They can afford to take an L. Ravens, I think, still feel like they have to get back to even and kind of reset their season at 500. So I've got Vikings. I think they'll be the longest undefeated team, and you've got the Steelers. So
yeah, let's see how those go. I agree. That was my second pick on them. I think, both of those teams, I wouldn't say are the best contending teams long term, but that's why we said let's just try and figure out who's going to have the longest streak. So I agree. I think those two are probably the two best. Let's see. I'm just riding with the Steelers till the wheels come off. So let's see what they do.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with some more fantasy football talk a little bit of more NFL talk, and maybe a little college football as well. So stay tuned. All right, we are back with Just Ballin with JB. This is part 2. We're going to go ahead and kick this section off with a little fantasy football update, as we always do. Jeff, why don't you tell us how did you do this week?
Yeah, it was another solid week over here for the J-Bone boys. I forget what I'm called even on that league, but yeah, good start, 3-0. Number 2, I think, in overall scoring. So right at the top there, tied in first, technically 3-0. Equan, huge week. Like I said, you just got to put everything on the Eagles. I'm going to need to get A.J. Brown back and some stuff. But, yeah, that was a huge week for Saquon. That was awesome to see, just watching the Eagles play, but also fantasy. And Kittle was hurt. So I had to find somebody quickly. I was able to scoop Cole Kmet off waivers, and he put up 20-something points, I think. So, yeah, that was solid. It was a nice week. It's nice to put up a decent score. The guy was playing my cousin, the low man of the week. He'll be sending a shotgun video, so I didn't need a whole lot to beat him. But always nice that you don't just win by a hair when the other guy sucks. You still put up decent numbers. So, yeah, Saquon, Cole Kmet came through big for me, and 3-0 start, baby. Happy with that.
Yeah, my week was not nearly as good. I mean, I didn't have the worst score. Obviously, that belonged to your opponent this week. But yeah, my team was led by my kicker and my defense. And while that might be able to win you a game in the National Football League, it does not win you many games in fantasy football. So, especially when the team that you're playing is the high score of the week and first in the league at 3-0. So I had a tough matchup from the get-go, but my team did not do ourselves any favors by just putting up single digits all over the board. Just an ugly week.
I mean, the defense and your kicker did put up like very good scores for a defense and a kicker, but you still expect the quarterback running, someone to put up something a little bit better.
Yeah.
But yeah, they did actually have nice games for you.
Yeah, I mean, if we were playing in the real world, I would feel very good about my football team. But in fantasy, it's been a bit of a struggle.
Yeah. Well, back to the real world.
Yes, that's right. Back to the real world. And we've got a couple segments here. And the first one is going to be a story that is, I think, a little underreported. And I wouldn't say it's an overreaction yet, but I think it might be something that could be a potential overreaction here in the future, especially as people look back. And the story I want to talk about is the Clemson football team dynasty that they have had recently under Dabo Swinney. And I think that it really is, it's even starting to feel like a lot of people are forgetting how dominant Clemson was and how recent that was too. It was only a couple of years ago they were in the national championship, what seemed like every year for almost half a decade. And it's because they won not two Super Bowls. They won 2 national championships, went to 4, and it was every year it felt like it was going to be Clemson, Alabama matching up with one another. And I think that part of the reason that maybe people are forgetting that or are kind of almost moving past Clemson too quickly, because they still have Dabo Swinney, right? I mean, it's not like he's a 80-year-old coach who's, on the tail end. Like, he's still, in the prime of his coaching career, you would think. And coming off of, just a couple years ago, fighting for national championships. I think one of the reasons why they're getting overlooked and maybe that dynasty is kind of falling down under the rug a little bit and people aren't really remembering it very well is in part because Alabama existed and exists still to this day. But Alabama under Nick Saban, the problem for Clemson was Alabama won a national championship before Clemson, multiple actually. They won a couple during the time when Clemson was winning, and they have won one after. And so I wonder, and this is kind of where I think maybe there's going to potentially be an overreaction to this, but I wonder if people are going to look back on the Alabama dynasty and basically kind of totally forget the fact that Clemson was a dynasty of their own right in the middle of it. and how impressive that Clemson program was to get to 4 national championships in a 6-year period, win 2 of them, and be, AP number 1 all 6 years at some point during the season. I mean, that's just something that very few teams have actually done. And it just so happens that they did it at the same time Alabama was doing it. And then I think maybe there's one other piece too to that. And one potential reason why Clemson might be getting overlooked is possibly the poor performance of their 2-star quarterbacks in the NFL. Deshaun came into the NFL and immediately was looking great. Things were going awesome in Houston. He hit up 1 or 2 or 26 too many massage parlors. We'll get into that maybe another time.
Just one too many, I think, was the problem.
Yeah, maybe just one. But he was looking like he was going to be the next guy. And then he kind of fell off the face of the earth, and now looks like he's barely even a starting quarterback, maybe not even a starting quality quarterback. Trevor Lawrence has had his struggles. And so I think that people are forgetting how good Clemson was and how cool those teams were to go straight from, you had Deshaun Watson, playing great, winning a national championship. Then you bring in Trevor Lawrence and you don't skip a beat. And that's very difficult. I mean, even Alabama, at times they're like, they don't want to get the quarterback right. So, it's going to be tough to win this year. And then they'll get the quarterback right maybe the year after. But, when you're comparing yourself against one of the greatest programs of all time, I think Clemson does have a lot to be proud of. And I think Dabo is a much better coach than he's even getting credit for to this day. And it's almost like a Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson kind of thing, I feel like. Like, I think in any other era, you'd be like, oh, Clemson was the dominant team, clearly, the best of the best. And unfortunately, they had their little dynasty run at the same time that Alabama was having a much longer, much bigger dynasty.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree that they deserve credit for the run that they have. Where I guess I probably disagree is just simply in the fact that I think they got credit in the moment for those things. I think from everything I hear and everything I see at this point, they have fallen off fairly quickly, right? So in comparison to like what Alabama did and that length of time, you're saying, okay, this was great for a minute, but it fell off a little quicker. I think Clemson is catching more heat, not even the quarterbacks in the league, but from what I hear, again, and what I read, and not being the biggest college football guy there is, Dabo just kind of being pretty stubborn and set in his ways with how he wants to run the program, what he wants to do. We all know, and personally, if you ask me, I think that's why Nick Saban got out when he did. Yes, he's 72 years old. If I'm 72, I want to be done doing anything. I want to be done sitting at my desk job, let alone out on the field coaching. But those guys, we know how they are. We know how ultra competitors they are. I think this transfer portal and dealing with all this crap, the NIL deals and stuff, I think he was like, this isn't for me. This isn't how I grew. This isn't how I was able to be successful. The last thing I want to do is go too far and then start to see that downfall. We talk all the time trying to retire at that right moment. Like, you retire after a championship, seems a little too early because it's like, how much do you still have in the tank? But it also means that people remember you as like, that's where you were. You were on the top of the mountain. So there's always that fine line of when's the time to do it. I think he was clearly even with Clemson coming in and having their nice run in between Alabama, they still kind of consistently did what they did. I think he saw kind of the writing on the walls, like, this is not what I want to do. This is not how I want to coach and do things. I'm just going to get out. And again, he was at a stage where he could. 72 makes sense. I think with Clemson, I think to your point, I think they will get plenty of credit. I think when it's all said and done, when Dabo's done, when he's retired, when he's not coaching anymore, I think people will look at that and be like, oh my gosh, that Deshaun team, that Trevor team, like, those were incredible. What a great run. They took down Alabama. Like, Alabama's here and like they were able to take them out. I think they will get the credit in due time. Problem is Dabo is 54. Dabo, he can't really go out now, or else it's kind of like, did you really have it in you? Did you get, you know what I mean? Like, there are going to be a little more questions. I think he knows he has to stay. The problem is he's unwilling to adapt. And we've seen that with coaches before, even in the NFL, right? We're seeing it possibly with Belichick, where we'll see if he comes back and what he can do. But like that, that particular, we brought up with like Tomlin even, like that particular style of coaching is different. Every new generation of people, like they're different. They're just all different. They learn differently. They want to be coached differently. I mean, we see it in business. You see it in sports. So to me, he has to learn how to adapt. I get being stubborn and be like, I was successful doing this. I want to stick to what I know. I was great at it. I've shown that it can work. But also, you have to learn to adapt over time as well. So I think they will get credit for what they did. I think what they did was very impressive. I think it was very cool. I think they'll get the credit in due time. I just don't think it was a long enough run to still like feel that credit. It was a little shorter. So it's like, okay, we kind of forget about it right now. It'll come back down the road, but he still has a while in his coaching career, I assume, unless something happens, where he's got to try and figure out how to get things back. But either way, I think at one point in time, he will get some really nice credit. Clemson in general will, and they'll be like, wow, that team took these guys down and made some stuff happen. But we see it in all sport. I mean, whether it's LeBron, whether it's like, I don't think we're going to fully appreciate him till he's done. You know, and I already start looking back at clips from LeBron's like rookie season. It's like, you forget how athletic he was because you see him now. Like he's playing his 40s. Like he's still athletic compared to you and I, but in the league, he's dropped off considerably. But you see those clips and you're like, oh my God, like that's what he used to do. So I think it's like most things. In the moment, it's hard unless you have that sustained success. The Patriots got appreciated the whole way because they just were constantly good. The Spurs, constantly good. The Alabama, constantly good. Clemson's was more of a blip. It was a very good blip. It was very successful. I think they'll get appreciated. I think it's just going to take a little more time for them to relish in those moments, unless Dabo gets it going again.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you on the transfer portal thing and recruiting. Dabo clearly does not like the transfer portal, and certainly the way it currently is constructed. And I think, you know, your points about Saban leaving when he did probably makes a lot of sense. And there's probably a ton of truth to that. I just think that, you know, Alabama's run of, 13, 14 years has maybe overshadowed the fact that, you know, having a 6-year run where you make it to 4 national championships and win 2 is almost unheard of. I mean, if you look back to like some of the dynasties kind of during our lifetimes, I mean, one of the early ones that I can remember in college football was the USC Trojans with Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush. And if I remember correctly, they won 1 national championship.
Well, I was going to say, if you look back at those, like think about how highly some of us look. I mean, Texas with Vince Young, they didn't even win one, did they? And I mean,
they won 1. They beat USC.
Oh, that's when they beat USC. That's my bad. Yeah. So they beat USC. But yeah, we look back at that. Obviously, we're not calling it a dynasty, but you look back very fondly of I mean, that's definitely one of the memories I have, like growing up, is like that game and those two teams. So I think the same will be said for Clemson in due time. I do get your point. Yes, if someone's got this sustained excellence for double the amount of time you have, of course it's going to overshadow it to some extent. But I do think people will, you know, again, kind of using the LeBron thought, you're going to see what he's done for 20-something years. Now, he's switched teams, so that obviously adds a different element to a dynasty. You know, there's no dynasty when you're switching teams. But over his run, even Golden State probably gets overshadowed a little bit. Even though that literally is a dynasty, in the midst of his great run, there is still some overshadowing just because there's greatness. So I agree with you. I mean, it will always have a little bit of that overshadowing because of it. But I think in due time, people will look back very fondly. Again, I mean, especially, I think it almost might work in their favor if those quarterbacks shit themselves in the NFL. They're going to be like, do you remember when Trevor was actually amazing, when he was incredible? Do you remember when Sean had never found a parlor before? Like, we're gonna remember those times and be like, my God, like that was awesome considering how bad things got. So yeah, I think it'll get there for him. Dabo's just so young too. It's going to be interesting to see how he does adapt. Is he willing to change with the times, or is he going to be stubborn? Is he going to get out earlier than a lot of coaches choose to do? Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, but I think they do deserve a lot of credit. Obviously, they were an incredible program for a good amount of time. They deserve it. Yeah, we'll see if it's one of those things you appreciate when it's gone, you know?
Yeah, I'd love to see him get back to relevance in the championship hunt, but you got to get the quarterback right, and he has struggled to do that since Trevor. He had DJU, who's now in Florida State and not looking good, and Cade Klubnik, their current quarterback, who's bounced back well after that tough Georgia loss, but I don't think he's the guy either. So, but I think that Clemson dynasty that they had is pretty impressive, and it gets taken for granted because of how good Alabama was.
Yeah. True.
All right, what you got something for us? Maybe an update on the Steelers, perhaps, and maybe something else even?
Yeah, I mean, when the Steelers are rolling like this, they just pop up in every segment, it feels like. So we don't need to spend too much time. But yeah, that was the first underreaction story from the week 1 of the podcast. I thought, people were not as impressed with the Steelers early on as I was. So that was my initial underreaction. And yeah, I think things are following suit. I mean, I think our goal, we were going to check back in week 4. I expect them to be 3-1. Well, they're already 3-0, so they can not show up. They can just take a DQ this week, and I'm good to go on that front.
Yeah, take a little victory.
But now I got them in our 3-0 team, staying undefeated the longest. So I do need them to show up and hopefully beat the Colts. But I wasn't sure if they could get a win this last week against the Chargers. So I expected a loss there and a win next week against the Colts to get to 3-1. Took out the Chargers in fine fashion, doing their play of ball. So that was exciting to see. Like I said, they got the Colts next. Cowboys, the name, throws a little scare in you, but this defense is something with the Steelers. TJ Watt is a man on a mission. That guy you can pay and lead a defense. And as we've already talked about, Cowboys defense, especially against the run, is weak. You got Fields likes to run it, 2 running backs, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren. So I think, they're doing exactly as I'd expect. And again, their division almost seems to keep getting weaker. I'm getting higher up on the Ravens after that game again. I'm actually trending up on them. But Bengals clearly got to be feeling worse about. And Browns, kind of regardless of what they do, I'm not feeling all that good on them. So, yeah, love where they're at and feeling good about that initial story. So we'll keep up on that one. New one that is kind of a double underreported or underreaction and overreaction. So I think the all the same team, same setup. The overreaction is on the Eagles, how bad they essentially actually are. Like, even if they're winning, it's like, my God, Jalen Hurts, all these turnovers, not saying it's nothing, but these turnovers are crazy. Nick Sirianni could be on the hot seat. He could get fired. Like, the overreaction to how bad they are, even starting 2-1, I think is the wrong reaction. The underreaction to it is like nobody, when they're talking about this in the overreaction form, is talking about A.J. Brown being out. I haven't seen a single person mention in one of these games, like, A.J. Brown is not playing in these games. Again, he is not only their best receiver, now with Saquon, maybe their second best weapon with Saquon, but was their best weapon for a long time. He is a significant player for them. Yes, if you're talking about the defense, that's not going to include A.J. Brown to it. But I just think the overreaction of still the funk that they're in, and they're lucky to pull these out, and they're not going to be anything long term. And the underreaction to A.J. Brown being out, not even being talked about, I just think is wild. These numbers obviously can say they hurt Jalen Hurts in the sense that he's not a Patrick Mahomes. He's not a Josh Allen. That's fair. I'm not claiming anymore. I thought maybe he had some potential to get up into that top 5 quarterback sphere at one point. I'd probably say at this point, I don't necessarily think he will. Anything can happen. He's clearly not there now, and it doesn't look like he's going to be entering that realm anytime soon. So these numbers don't necessarily help him as an overall quarterback, and I think there's plenty of things he needs to work on. But again, the underreaction to nobody bringing up A.J. Brown not being in these games, right? It's like NBA game. Like, you're one of your starters is out. Like, that's a big deal. You have 5 guys out there. Yes, you have 11 guys on the field, but if it's one of your top weapons, it's a significant deal. Jalen Hurts, and these numbers are kind of crazy because it's almost split like 50-50. 33 games he's played with A.J. Brown. Jalen Hurts is throwing for 238 yards per game. And basically, I'm just going to round these numbers, 1.5 touchdowns a game. So 238 yards, 1.5 touchdowns a game. 31 games without him. So again, almost identical with and without him. 31 without him. He's throwing for 141 yards a game. and 0.75 touchdowns a game. Almost, again, identical, cutting in half. Touchdowns and yards almost cut in half with or without him. His rushing yards in those games, he's rushing for 42.5 with A.J. Brown, and he's averaging 0.85 touchdowns per game. Without him, he's rushing for 37 and averaging 0.42. So the rushing yards isn't quite half, but the rushing touchdowns actually is. So with and without him on the field, he's a different player. Again, that doesn't say a whole lot if you're counting on Jalen Hurts to be the savior and you think he's, Pat Mahomes, he's going to be your top guy. Like, that doesn't say a lot for him, even though I still am high on Jalen Hurts. Those don't look great for him. But the point is, with him out there, he is a different player. Whether it's because they're showing more attention to him, it opens up all these other players and there's more options there, or they can't double team him and he can just throw it to AJ and AJ's able to catch and make plays for him that other guys can't make. But either way, him not being on the field is a significant difference to the Eagles' offense. And when you look at these games and where they're finishing up, you have to give the Eagles' defense some serious credit this past week. I mean, they're playing the Saints, which you can say it's a little fluky, but the Saints have had the best offense by far to start in the first couple weeks. They held them to 219 yards passing in the air. Derek Carr, again, I think we all probably agree Derek Carr is an average quarterback, but to start the year, he was high flying. He's putting up some serious numbers. They held them to 89 yards on the ground compared to their 172. So the defense, to me, I think you can't really say anything but positive things. Holding, what were they, finished 10 points, the Saints? Holding to 10 points, 12 points, after they had 80 in the first two games. So you hold them to 12. You got to give the defense credit, no questions asked. Like, you just have to give them pretty good credit for what they did there. And if you're faulting them on the offensive end, I agree Jalen Hurts needs to figure out the turnover thing a bit. Even the fumbles. Stuff's going to happen every once in a while, but when it's clearly you're doing it consistently, there's something you can change, right? Josh Allen, which again might come up a bit later here, he's figuring out a way to not turn the ball over now after he's typically been a turnover machine. So there is something, like, some hits are inevitable and they're going to happen, but, like, you got to hang on the ball, you're fumbling too much, and then some of these stupid picks, absolutely he has to clean up. But I think the way the defense is moving along, very impressive. And I think people are not giving Jalen enough credit, or the offense enough, to say we're missing one of our top weapons, like a number 2 weapon, and he clearly makes some significant difference on the offensive end. To me, that's crazy. I think the Eagles are in pretty good shape. Getting that win against the Falcons would have been really nice, but I think they're in good shape, especially with the Cowboys looking worse. I like them to win that division. I think they're going to make a nice run. I don't mind them hitting some bumps along the way, get them acclimated to the playoffs and get going. But yeah, I think people are not talking about AJ being out enough at all.
Yeah, I love that take, honestly. I haven't heard anybody talking about A.J. Brown at all. I almost forgot that he hadn't been playing. Like, that's what's crazy. And that's a great point about Jalen Hurts' numbers. And, it's not necessarily a knock on Jalen Hurts. I think for the most part, most of us have been pretty impressed with what he's done in the NFL.
Sure.
For one, I liked him at Oklahoma, but at Alabama, if you recall, he got benched in the national championship game because he wasn't good enough for Tua. And so I kind of felt like at that moment, like, okay, his career is going to start going downhill from here. Transfers to OU, plays fantastic, but just didn't think he was an NFL-type quarterback, and, he's proved a lot of people wrong. That being said, he has some limitations. He is not the most accurate passer of the football, but he does know how to make plays. And when you have a playmaker of A.J. Brown's, capability out on the field, he's going to find him, and they're going to be more successful with him on the field. It's not a Patrick Mahomes situation where you can get rid of your top receiver, your Tyreek Hill, and just win 2 Super Bowls, right? But I don't think the Eagles expect that to be the case. And if they do, I think maybe they're scouting their own quarterback, which is, unlike them. I think their, front office has done a good job. But, I agree. I think if, or when A.J. Brown gets back on the field, I expect to see Jalen Hurts' numbers look a little better. And I expect that Eagles offense to look a lot better. But you've got to be pretty impressed with the defense for showing up the way they did against the Saints. As you said, maybe the Saints, aren't as good as they were the first 2 weeks, but I liked what I saw from the Saints offensively in those games. So I think maybe the Eagles defense did step up a little bit, and the Saints defense or the Saints offense might have just struggled a little. So it's probably a combination of, one team played poorly, one team played a little better. But I think the Eagles are sitting in pretty good shape right now. All things considered, they get A.J. Brown back. And, I mean, with the Cowboys and the mess that they're in, I think the Eagles have got to feel pretty good about their situation. I think even Nick Sirianni can take a deep breath and, maybe not have to worry about his job, even though I think he's a pretty bad coach.
I mean, we don't have him on
Hurts.
our hot seat topic yet, so he's at least hanging in there. But
I love Jalen Hurts. As a dude, I think he's like a great leader of men. I think if he's your quarterback, you're probably gonna be ready to play.
And they deserve the skepticism after that funk, whatever you want to call last year. I mean, that was an epic downfall. There's no way to really sugarcoat that. I get it. So I think they deserve to have some skepticism. But when I look at that, like I said, I mean, that's definitely a story that people are not bringing up enough. Like, you have to at least give them a little credit in some of those spots. A.J. Brown being out. I mean, take the top receiver off any of these teams, and if Joe Burrow loses that game by 2 touchdowns last night, 3 touchdowns without Jamar Chase, you're like, yeah, well, you didn't have Jamar. What do you expect the guy to do, right? I mean, if CeeDee Lamb's out on the Cowboys, like, you got reasons. They have those weapons, and they're losing some of these games. You're like, what's going on there? So, yeah, I think I'm very interested to see when he'll get back, 1, and then 2, see what they can do. But I think with that division, like you said, I think the Cowboys are in trouble just because I think some of the people in there are a little bit better. But I think the Eagles can still maintain kind of where they're at. So I'm excited to see what they can do. Like I said, I've been kind of high on them, so I'm hoping they'll prove me right. Yeah, we'll see. AJ needs to get back, get healthy.
Yeah, lots to be excited about if you're an Eagles fan. So let's jump to our next little segment here. We'll do a little game. So this game is good, bad, and ugly. And so we're going to talk a little good, bad, ugly, each one of us from the last weekend's slate of games. Jeff, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I was just laughing. I see the good, bad, ugly. I think of your college night. You're just like, oh, which was good? But yeah, let's roll through them real quick. So I'll try and be pretty quick on these. But yeah, good. Josh Allen, I think he's shown a lot this season. I think he's proven a lot of people wrong. The Bills in general. Stephon Diggs walks out the door. He's a turnover machine. He's a roller coaster. He's just too erratic. 0 picks this year. MVP leader at this point. I get it's early, but still, I mean, he's leading the show, no question. 3-0, awesome. They're looking really good, and I don't see any big signs of them slowing down. Like I said, I do feel good about the Ravens this week, but they're looking good. That's pretty awesome to see from them. Bad, going 49ers, 1-2. Just a tough thing. I think we all understand that they're a good team. They have a ton of talent, and everybody at the beginning of the year, like, you'd be stupid not to just pencil them in the playoffs, right? I mean, like, what would be your reason other than injuries? Things are going to happen. There's been multiple people out there talking about that as like, yeah, we all like the team, but I don't know if they can stay healthy for the whole season again. They did it for the most part last year. I mean, that was a great shot for them to try and win it all. Injuries are going to be really, really tough for them. It sounds like maybe McCaffrey's could be, a little more lingering than maybe us thought.
Yeah, he's seeing a specialist in Germany.
In Germany, that's what I mean. That usually means that it's probably not nothing. That's probably something if you got to go to Germany and get it checked out. So, I mean, wishing the best for him. And yeah, nothing, would never wish anything bad on anybody injury wise. But yeah, just kind of bad for him. It just sucks that they're going to have to deal with that. And hopefully they can figure it out. And, Kittle has been out. McCaffrey, so they've had some big players. I mean, Debo has been banged up a little bit. So yeah, just kind of unfortunate for them. Hopefully they can get healthy and make a run. But right now, yeah, looking a little on the bad side for them. Ugly, I got to go with just the Bengals. I mean, it's, Jaguars were right there with it to throw in there. But Bengals, I think we all had pretty high expectations for them to go 0-3. You lose to the Patriots. I don't care if you typically started slow in the, like, I don't even know what that means. You know what I mean? It's like we bring it up because they've done it and they've proven otherwise. Like, okay, I guess they have a history of doing that, but it's like, what does that mean? Like, it doesn't mean just get a free ride in week 1 to lose against the Patriots for no reasons. For no reason. I think the Patriots are pretty bad and they lost to them. Again, the Commanders might be better than we thought. Jaden Daniels looks really good as a rookie QB. But again, I mean, we just saw 0 defense from him. I think that's going to be really trouble. 0-3 in a tough division. That just, looks ugly. Coach is, in our opinion, one of the 2 coaches on the hot seat. So, yeah, things are looking ugly there. Jamar Chase, no deal. T. Higgins hurt. I mean, there's just a lot there going on that's not looking good. That's a pretty ugly situation.
Yeah, that is going to be tough for the Bengals. But yeah, I think that Foreigner situation is something to keep an eye out on. I'm not ready to say that the 49ers are, going to miss the playoffs at this moment, but Seahawks are 3-0. The Rams just beat them, and the Rams have a lot of injuries right now, but I like their coaching. I like their quarterback, and I don't, you can't, write them off. I think the Cardinals are frisky because they've got a great wide receiver and Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Kyler Murray is an electric player. Is he good enough for Super Bowls? I don't know. I doubt it. But I think he's good enough to potentially win a game or 2 in the regular season that hurts another division opponent. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on with the bad there in that, really they're going to have to figure something out because they can't afford to get too far back in the NFC and end up in a situation where they're fighting for a playoff spot at the end of the season with a roster that's aging and has had some injury concerns.
Yeah. Yeah, no question. No question. What's your Jaboo?
Yeah.
Good bag, ugly?
So my good bad, ugly from the weekend is actually going to go the college route. And so my good is Illinois' win. Big win for the program. Brett Bielema, the coach there, he's doing a phenomenal job, I think, and he's got the team playing well on defense. They've got a cornerback in Xavier Scott, who's tied for the lead in all of college football in interceptions with 4. He's taken one of those back for a pick 6. He's also a huge dude. He's lined up at corner, safety, and linebacker this season. For multiple snaps at each position. So he's a pretty versatile guy. It kind of reminds me of, what's his name? Xavier Simmons, I think. I might have the name wrong there, but I think his last name was Simmons, drafted by the Arizona Cardinals, but didn't end up working out.
I was thinking that guy from the Seahawks. He was probably a little bigger, I would assume, but that guy was kind of like safety, but coming with the Legion of Doom.
Cam Chancellor, maybe?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, kind of in that type of mold, like bigger, stronger, but can cover. So I think Illinois is, their pass defense is pretty underrated. So I think it was a really good weekend for the University of Illinois.
Absolutely.
My bad is Missouri. So Missouri, they're a top 10 ranked team. I think they were number 7 coming into the weekend. They barely squeaked by with a win over Vanderbilt, which, as I heard someone say over the weekend, that's a school with academic standards. You're not supposed to struggle to beat them. And I think there's some truth in that, Mizzou's kind of a favorite in the SEC in large part because they've got a really weak schedule. And they won on a shanked field goal. It was, double overtime. Vanderbilt's lining up for like a 27-yard field goal, and the kicker just shanks it left from the right hash. Just a pure shank. Mizzou's celebrating like they, just won the, SEC, and it's like, you barely beat Vanderbilt. So they've got a lot to work on if they want to actually be taken seriously in the college football playoff. And with the schedule as weak as they have, they're probably going to have to, win everything but 1, maybe 2 games if they make it to the SEC championship. So they've got a lot to work on. But my ugly is Oklahoma's offense. It was It was tough to watch in stretches. I don't blame it all on Jackson Arnold, the quarterback, who did, by the way, just get benched, it sounds like, for Hawkins, I believe, is the backup that they brought in. So he's going to be starting this next week. It's not all on the quarterback. If you watch back on the film, or we watched the game pretty closely, play calling was pretty awful. I mean, there are some clear moments where his first read is the wrong read. And, Joel Klatt kind of went over it a little bit on his show, just on when he covered that game. And there's just a lot to not like about Oklahoma's offense right now. And I think they're going to be in for a rude awakening, because unlike Missouri, Oklahoma has one of the tougher schedules in the SEC this year. They're going to host Alabama. They're going to go play at LSU. They've got some tough games on the calendar, and it's a new season, new conference for them. And I'm nervous that, their offense doesn't get this together here quickly. Forget making the college football playoff. I mean, they're going to be lucky to finish 500 the way things are going. I know they're 3-1, and, you never want to overreact to one loss, but their 3 wins were pretty underwhelming. And their one loss, I think that game was not as close as the score indicated. I think Oklahoma clearly looked like a lesser opponent in that game. So that's pretty concerning if you're an OU fan, and if you think that the Sooners are going to, do what Texas is doing as a new member of the SEC, which I think is going to be significantly better. And I think Texas is proving that they're a top-end program, offense and defense.
Yeah, that ugly story probably, mainly because it's the biggest game I watched in college, I'd say, this weekend. But yeah, that was intriguing to me. And maybe I don't know as much about the backstory as other people or as you do, but that was a little shock to me. Like, we both kind of had that as a game to watch. A lot of reasons to look at that game, not only ranked opponents, big SEC game for Oklahoma coming in, the backstory with the coaching that had happened in the past. But to see their quarterback get benched that quickly, I mean, it wasn't like the ugliest game I've ever seen. You know what I mean? Like, it was not looking good for them. Obviously, that makes sense. That's why I got pulled. But I was a little shocked to see your starting quarterback get pulled. And I was about to say, like, I don't recall that really ever happening. And then we had just talked about Jalen Hurts and two of people, in that moment. So probably should have done a little more research to see other other situations where that occurred. But the guy they have in, so is Arnold is their starting quarterback, as a 5-star recruit coming in, and then they replace him with a 3-star recruit. You know what I mean? So I could see situations where you had, maybe the starting quarterback you have is only a 3-star recruit, and he's kind of who you're rolling with, but you brought in a 5-star, he's just not ready yet, and then flashes of some stuff going on, it's not good, and you bring in the 5-star. Like, that makes sense to me. But that quickly, in like that big of a game, that just felt like a little bit of a shock to me, that you would kind of pull the ripcord, so to speak, that quickly. And again, maybe there's something I'm missing. I don't know about the details, but I was just like, holy cow, they just pull their starting quarterback and put a guy like that quickly, that early. And seeing the 5-star, 3-star, I was like, wow, that was a little shocking to me.
Yeah, it's pretty concerning for OU, because they had Dylan Gabriel last year was their quarterback. He's a lefty, and he did all right. I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of his, but he looked all right. He's capable of running the offense. They beat Texas last year in the Red River rivalry, so and he played well in that game. So he's a good quarterback. And they basically pushed him out the door in the offseason, and he went to Oregon and transferred to be the starting quarterback at Oregon, who has struggled a little bit to start their season, but they picked it up in this last game. They did that because they felt that Jackson Arnold, the quarterback, the 5-star, was the guy.
Was that guy, yeah.
And 3.5 games in, and you're benching him for a 3-star recruit, like you said. I don't know what's going on there, but that is not a good sign, because Jackson Arnold was on the team last year. So they saw him practice. They saw him play with, the second string guys, and whatever they saw, they liked enough to be like, well, we'll push our starting quarterback out the door. And now I think they would love to have Dylan Gabriel back running the show, because that offense is just not doing anything.
Yeah.
So I put a lot of that blame on the coaching staff for maybe picking the wrong guy. Maybe Jackson Arnold isn't the wrong guy, but it's the wrong time, and he needed a little bit more time to develop. I don't know, but it is not good, and it's not a fixable situation, really, because you have who you have on your roster.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, you're going through the season with what you got. And like you said, I mean, that new test in the SEC, yeah, I don't know. They're not going to be in good shape with that. I was definitely surprised watching that. I meant to text you about it, and I forgot to even say something. But I was like, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough. So, all right, well, that's our good, bad, and ugly. Let's talk about the games we're going to be watching this weekend as we get close to wrapping up here. So, Jeff, NFL games, or actually, let's start with college football. So, Saturday, college football, and then we'll get into the NFL. But,
yeah,
for college football, the two games that I'm watching, which unfortunately are on at the same time, so I'm going to have to do split screen. But the big game of the week.
Picture in picture, or did that disappear?
I think you can still do it, but now what I do is I just have another TV set up on a stand, and I just cart it into the room next to my main TV, and I just watch on two full-size TVs.
There you go.
At least that's the setup for now, but I'll be doing that this Saturday night at 6:30 because first and foremost, we've got Alabama and Georgia, and so that's the game to watch if you want to see, who is the best of the best. If you haven't tuned into much yet this season and you're wondering, is Alabama still just as good as they were under Nick Saban? Is Georgia still the same old Georgia from the last few years and just a juggernaut? I think that's going to be an awesome game. It's at Alabama. Georgia's favored. It's a close game still projected to be. I love Alabama in this game. I think they're going to come out swinging. I think it's going to be a really fun game to watch, and it'll be a good measuring stick for both teams the rest of the way of the season. At the same time as that game, I'm going to be watching Illinois and Penn State. So I grew up around the Champaign-Urbana area, going to Illinois football games. They've had some periods of time where they have looked all right, but I think that's going to be a good game. It's in Happy Valley. It's a night game. I don't believe it's going to be a whiteout game, which is fortunate for Illinois because those whiteout games get pretty rowdy, and it's pretty impressive that stadium filled with 100,000 fans all wearing white T-shirts.
Yeah. Who used to really run? Was that Saquon Barkley of the Eagles? Yeah,
That's right.
That's where he used to white out. Yes.
That's right. So those will be the games to tune in for college football. Jeff, what kind of NFL games we got this week that are worth watching?
Yeah, I got a few for different reasons that I think could be worth watching or not watching, but just checking the highlights, checking the stats on Eagles-Bucks on Sunday, noon Central Time at least. I think that's kind of the overreaction, underreaction game to me. I mean, Baker Mayfield gets a lot of hype when things are looking good. And then
quarterbacks.
There you go. Yeah, OU quarterback, quick to dump on him when things are bad. Eagles, again, we just talked about how up and down people can be on them. So I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's actually two good teams. Both going to be competing for their division. I think it'll be a good game and kind of the overreaction, underreaction game of the week. I like for a game that you might not want to throw on your TV necessarily. If you do have the picture-in-picture, you might throw it in the bottom right corner or put it on the TV stand on your laptop, something like that in the corner. But the Saints-Falcons, I think, is going to be maybe not the most fun game to watch, but I think that's going to be an intriguing game that's going to tell us a decent amount. We were talking, Jordan and I, about just early in this year. Feels like it's really hard to tell who's good because of the different teams winning. There's so many teams we thought were good that are 0-3 or 1-2. So many teams we thought were bad that are 3-0 or 2-1. We're trying to still figure out who's good, what wins meant something, and which ones didn't. So I think the Falcons have been that big team. People were high on them early, and then they lost a couple games, and all of a sudden people are kind of like falling off the wagon. But I think they are a good team. The Saints were a team nobody thought was anything, and then they come out and start hot as they did. And now we're saying, are they just fake, or are they actually a decent team? So I think this is going to be a good indicator. It's going to help us, one, understand kind of where those two teams stand, but also the other teams that they've played. It's going to give us a little better indicator. So maybe not the game you want to put on the big screen and watch all on Sunday. It's it's a noon game as well, so maybe that's just a picture-in-picture game, but keep an eye on it, see what happens in that. It'll tell you a little something about the NFL. And last one, I think that's actually a fun game. Definitely tune into. I think it should be a good one. Monday Night Football. Obviously, it's the only one on, or actually 2 games on Monday night these days, but one of the only games on. Monday Night Football, Seahawks, Lions. I think that one's going to be fun. I think Lions got a nice win over the Cardinals there, but I think they're looking to kind of get things rolling a little bit better. They haven't seemed to kind of hit their perfect stride yet. You saw a little bit of it last week. I think they're going to try and step that up just a notch. And the Seahawks have looked good. I don't think anyone was overly high on him. Geno kind of had a regression year last year. So I think it was 2 years ago, had a really nice season. People were like, hey, he's not just a career backup. He can be a starter in this league. Last year kind of regressed. People say, maybe he's not that good. Looking really good this year. They have the weapons. DK Metcalf, Smith, and Jigba. Tyler Lockett's their number 3 receiver. Kenneth Walker is hurt right now, but I mean, that's some serious firepower on offense. Defense has been looking good, scheming up things really nicely. They're 3-0. So I think that's going to be a game you don't want to miss. I think that's going to be fun, hopefully high scoring. I picture that one both in the 30s, maybe like a Bengals-Washington, but better quality even. So yeah, I think that one's going to be a lot of fun to tune into. That's kind of what we got for the NFL this week.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of good games this week. I love that Seahawks-Lions game. I think that's going to be an awesome one. Both teams are playing well. Both teams do kind of a little bit on all sides of the ball. Should be a really fun Monday night matchup. Let's wrap this up with our locks of the week. So as a recap, Jeff's locks of the week. So far he's 0-2, but I think there's some. I think there's something to be optimistic about. Tough second week for you, but you got that out of your system, and in my experience, once you get that out of your system, it's nothing but go from there. Because I'm 1-1.
Yeah, you just got to get that terrible loss out of the way, and then you're good. I didn't get a terrible loss week 1, so I took it in week 2. Yeah, Texans. That was a tough one. I get the sample size of this new Texans regime, if you will, with Stroud and stuff. It's been somewhat short-lived, but they just haven't appeared to be a team that's fluky or very up and down. They just appear to be very solid. CJ seems to be a good leader, and really, I mean, everything he talks about, says, does on the field looks really good. I just could not find a reason that they would lose to the Vikings. And then the reason came is just the Vikings are a lot better than any of us thought that they were, definitely than I thought they were. They're solid. So, yeah, they got smoked, similar to the Cowboys week 1. Yeah, terrible L there. So 0-2 start, not good. We got to get back on the train. This could be a risky one just because the Chiefs are, always the Chiefs. But I do think Chargers typically play them well. I think the Chargers are going to try and rebound after that loss last week. I think they believe they can play better than that. I think they're going to be a solid team this year. I think the coaching is going to make a big difference in there, not only just motivation for people, but scheming-wise as well. They just look like a different team than they have in the past. They typically play the Chiefs fairly well as it is. Chargers are +8 right now. That's what I had it at. I like that a lot. I mean, I could see this, even if they lose by a field goal, a touchdown, you're still covering in that spot. Not saying that they are going to win. I mentioned earlier there's a chance. I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers can pull off the upset. The Chiefs are just in that spot where they win ugly kind of during the season. They're not in any rush or panic. They know what they need to do to get to the playoffs, and then they make things happen. So I don't think they're going to be overly, motivated to play a perfect game this week. If Chargers can come in highly motivated, want to play well, get back after that loss this week, +8 I just think is too many. Like I said, even if they do lose, which is very possible, field goal, touchdown, I like them +8. That's going to be my lock. That's going to get me on track, get me to 1-2, start to get me to, 15-2. I'm going on a 15-game heater. I'm Harbaugh. Harbaugh's going to start my 17-game win streak.
Yeah, I like that bet a lot. I don't necessarily think the Chargers are going to win that game, but I expect it to be close. And 8.5 points or 8 points, depending on where you get your lines from, that, you're going to get a lot of opportunity for the Chargers to cover that. And I love getting that many points. So, yeah, I think you've got 1-2 written all over written
Let's
all
do
over
it. I need it. Come on, please. Give me it.
Yeah. So for my lock of the week, well, actually, I'll recap last week real quick. So had the Lions,
Good win.
over the Cardinals. Felt good about that all week. Felt good about it watching the game. I think the Lions are a really solid team. Just the type of team that you don't expect them to have two bad games in a row, especially when a lot of the blame in that game they lost to the Buccaneers can be placed back on
Campbell.
coaching, poor
Yeah.
game management, just some stuff that you can clean up. And I think that's helpful going into the next week because you can say, hey, look, we played better than this. We just need to clean it up a little bit. And so we really loved that game going into last week, and it worked out perfect. For my lock of the week this week, looking at a few different ones, and so I'm going to go a little out of the box as well here. I'm actually going to go on the college side again, and I'm looking at that Illinois-Penn State game. Well, Penn State opened at minus 17.5, and at least on ESPN Bet right now, it's showing at minus 18.5. And I'm going to go ahead and take Illinois plus the 18.5 points. And it's not because I think, Illinois is some team that is going to be threatening for the college football playoff. This is it got more to do, or almost equal to do, with the fact that I don't think Penn State's as good as maybe their record indicates. I would have thought that they would have beat, maybe Bowling Green a little bit better. Would have thought that they would have had a slightly better performance against West Virginia. Obviously, they smashed Kent State. But everybody does, because I'm not even sure that Kent State plays those games. They just accept the check and you just tell them what score you want to put in the box. But I'm not super keen on Penn State's offense. I think that they're going to struggle a lot. I think I'm not high on their quarterback, Drew Aller. I think he's a decent quarterback, but I think he's going to struggle against the Illinois secondary. And I think we're in for a low-scoring game, which bodes well for Illinois getting 18.5 points. And I think that team is a little tougher than people think. I think Penn State's going to find that out. I'm going to guess Penn State's going to maybe be overlooking Illinois a little bit. And so, yeah, I think that Illinois plus 18.5, I love getting that many points. And, I know in college it's a little different than the NFL is in terms of those spreads. But 18.5 is a lot. And Illinois, just went in and beat Nebraska. And that's a tough place to win football games, too. I mean, they've had 400 straight sellouts. So, they packed that place in. They love their football. They've got a good quarterback, good coach. Yeah, I like Illinois plus 18.5.
I mean, I didn't, one, know we were going to be picking college, games for this, and two, in Illinois, apparently we can't bet on our own colleges in here, which just seemed odd because I want to support my teams and then, bank off of them. I don't know. They must see it differently that we can't, there's some information being passed between players and bettors. I don't know, but either way, here in Illinois, we can't bet on that. In Tulsa, obviously, you're able to. But yeah, that one, I don't know. It just seems fishy because I think all of us are looking at that. Anybody from Illinois is looking at that and just like, that's an ungodly amount of points for two ranked opponents. I don't care if it's 25 versus 1. I don't care if it's Georgia versus Boston College sneaking in at 25. Just seems like a lot. I think my brother-in-law texted me Sunday just randomly, hadn't talked about anything. It was like, hey, Illinois over Penn State, plus 17.5. It was there. And he's like, I think I want to lock it in early before the line moves. I don't think he realized it was going to move the other way. Now they got 18 or 18.5. I don't know. That just seems crazy to me that it's that far. That feels like a steal. I can't bet on it, so I'm just going to hang out here, watch it, and see if there was some trickery going on, because that seems like a crazy line to me. It feels like a good pick, but as we know in gambling, the best picks oftentimes fail you, which is why I'm 0-2 today. So
yeah,
we'll see. Best of luck to Illinois. I'd like to see them do well. Four of my 5 sisters went to Illinois. You're a big Illinois fan. Yeah, a lot of Illinois fans in my life, so love to see them win it. But yeah, let's see what they do there. That should be a good one, I'm hoping.
Awesome. Well, we'll circle back next week with how we did, and hopefully we are combined for 500 after this week. So
That'd be great.
that would be a great sign. All right, well, that's a wrap for episode 3 here this week. Thank you for listening. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. We are, again, on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. So wherever you like to listen, we are there. And if you're on Spotify or YouTube, you can see our faces as well. I think Apple Podcasts still doesn't have that feature, but if you're listening on Spotify, you can see us too. So tune in. Feel free to send us some questions, comments, anything you want us to talk more about, less about. We're here for it.
That's right. I'm going to have a nice picture, too. If you're watching the video, I'm going to get a new picture in the background. It's waiting, so we'll have to see if Jordan can guess what I'm going to put back there soon. But I need a little visual behind me if you are watching. So we'll talk on that next time, see if he can guess what's going to be back there.